Thank you for joining us, everybody, for our Mastering Omnichannel Commerce webinar. This is part 2, 3 ways to expand your retail footprint. I'm David Rastatter from Jitterbit, and I'd like to pass it on to Ron Wastel, who's going to be your host, and he's going to kind of be mediating the conversation. And feel free to ask questions using the control panel of your Zoom control panel on the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. Anything that we did not answer during this session, we are happy to engage with you after, and we can drop some contact information in the dialog box of your Zoom panel. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to you, Ron. Welcome.
Thanks, David. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. So why don't we jump into introductions of the panel here. Basically, we're going to do a quick intro, then do the panel Q&A. After about 40 minutes, we have about 4 questions that we're going to run through together. And then attendees can open it up and ask any questions that we have for the panel as well. So if we want to go to the pictures, I'll do a quick introduction myself. I've been in the integration and automation space for about 20 years, working in customer experience, commerce experience, employee experience, as well as customer service experience. So I'm coming to the panel kind of with the expertise around how do you really integrate and automate these systems across different environments. Ken, do you want to go next and kind of introduce yourself and your background?
Absolutely. So I have been at ShipStation, or now Octane, as some of you may know, is our parent company brand. And if you don't know, you will be seeing more about that soon. But I manage, besides the fancy title that I have, it is essentially our ERP, EDI, and iPaaS partnerships, right? So it's these different order sources and integrations that are needed to connect everything that, our sellers are using to get the maximum experience out of basically delivery, right? So that's my piece of the puzzle.
Great. Thanks, Ken. Darren, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Darren Lynch. I am the founder and CEO of Irish Titan. We are an SI, solutions integrator, or more plainly, an e-commerce agency. We build and grow e-commerce channels is how I summarize that. So that means we build the sites for our merchants and then work with them on their ongoing growth strategies, acquisition, conversion, retention. So email marketing, paid search, SEO. We have been in business for a long time. I started Irish Titan way back in 2004, coming out of e-commerce experience even before that. Believe it or not, e-commerce did exist before 2004. And we have deep and long relationships with lots of the tech partners, including everybody represented on this panel, Shopify, ShipStation /Octane, and Jitterbit, all healthy partnerships.
Great. Thanks, Darren. Sean, welcome back. You want to do a quick introduction again?
Sure. Thanks, Ron. So I work at Shopify's retail partnerships, and retail at Shopify means our bricks and mortar practice. So my focus are on people doing physical retail, but for all intents and purposes, it's an omni-channel value proposition that I take part in, because if they're doing physical retail with Shopify, then they should be doing digital storefronts with us as well. So.
Great. Thanks, Sean. So why don't we jump into it? I've got 4 questions for the panel here that I'll run through, and I'll kind of guide the panel on maybe getting input. If you can see, we've kind of tried to set up expertise in different areas, right? Obviously, I have the data and integration and automation expertise, but Darren's got that consulting and implementation expertise. We've got Sean here with the e-commerce platform and point of sale expertise. And then obviously we've got Ken as well with the expertise around order and fulfillment. So with that, let's jump into the first question. First question is going to be, what are the key challenges when a business wants to move to e-commerce or to brick and mortar, and vice versa? So if you're an e-commerce shop, how do you move to brick and mortar potentially to start to drive your omni-channel, and vice versa? So I'm gonna let Sean lead this one, because obviously that's his expertise. Sean, do you have thoughts about what are the key challenges you see when you talk to customers and prospects out there about what they're trying to deal with, both these channels?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kick off with e-commerce looking to move into the bricks and mortar space. So offline retailing, let's say. And there's a couple areas where there's just immediate challenges. One is finding the right space and making sure you're securing a lease, making sure you're set up in an area where your target customers are. So this is a big thing because there's merchants that might think they want to be in a certain area, but the data that they would glean from their let's say their shipping data, like where are their customers, where are they shipping to, where are site visits coming from analytics, that might inform where opening a bricks and mortar location would be like best positioned relative to where their customers are. So that one's big is finding the right space, securing the lease. Another big challenge that merchants will come across is staffing, and staffing is huge. So it's a major pain point people will find. They don't really think about it until they come up against that wall, especially in staffing managers. So operationalizing in-person sales is different than online, and you need to make sure that incentive structures are in line with how you find customers in your other sales channels. Experienced retail managers will help get standard operations and best practices off the ground and running quickly. So it's key to have maybe outside staffing agencies or consultation in that area, because staffing is a pain point that a lot of people overlook until they actually come up against it. Another big challenge is making sure that your sales channels actually present the same. And this goes for making sure pricing is consistent, promotions are consistent, returns and exchange policies are in line across the board, and that the physical staff is provided with clear direction on how to handle objections that might arise from purchases from other channels. And then finally, integrating your solution stack. And we touched on this in our last webinar quite a bit, but that means customer data, order data, inventory, et cetera. And you want to make sure that your solution stack is sharing and updating data from all operations in real time. But finally, the big one I want to call out is for merchants moving from e-commerce into bricks and mortar. And this is a multifaceted challenge, is that you want to make sure that your omni-channel strategy complements and enhances what's made you so successful online. And so this means making sure the gap between digital and physical retail is bridged from day one. So you want the channels to have the same information shared between one another. And you want customers to see that, something is in stock before they actually go to the store and visit. And you want to let them be able to add an item to a cart and then have it waiting for them at the store, at the register for pickup. So this is the channel seamlessly working with one another to add purchase decisions. And if something's out of stock in store, you want to be able to buy it at that like point of purchase anyway, and then fulfill it the same way you would have from your digital channel. So these are like the omni-channel shopping experiences, that strategy to make sure from day one, the gap is bridged between online and offline, and making sure you have the right infrastructure and systems built out, or at least planned to facilitate that.
Wow, that was pretty good, Sean. I was impressed with that. So, thinking about this from an order fulfillment standpoint, Ken, what do you think? Do you see any key differences really between, companies that you talk to that set up e-commerce environments and then are considering putting in physical stores and vice versa around the order fulfillment process?
Yeah. And so we've seen this from both ways, right? From where we've had people that are traditional e-commerce merchants start building out brick and mortar stores. And obviously throughout COVID, you have brick and mortar stores that had no choice but to go e-commerce. So we've seen this kind of this path before. One of the interesting things that has happened especially in the last 4 or 5 years, is you've seen companies that are, let's just say, typically e-commerce start realizing that shipping, if you're located in California, it gets really expensive to ship constantly across the entire United States, right? If you're in St. Louis, where I am, at least it's kind of in the middle, right? So we've seen a rise of people, if they're big enough, build distribution centers, but mainly people are using 3PLs. So this is where it gets interesting. We've had people that are traditional brick and mortar realize that they already have 3PLs, and those are their stores, right? So how do you leverage that inventory that you have, even if it's just regional? If you're here in St. Louis and you got 4 locations, you have 4 DCs, right? So you can be able to leverage that. And we've seen, vice versa, where people were considering maybe building a 3PL, but realized, hey, we sell a lot of our product in these areas, just put a retail store there, right? So it goes both ways. But one key thing is, as you do this, one of the challenges is there's 2 main challenges, I would say. One, how do you convert that physical location to be able to ship out of, right? To have those facilities. And it can definitely be done with pack stations in the back and also the right technologies. And so now all of a sudden your inventory and your financials and all those things really do have to sync and be up to date if you're going to keep that e-commerce presence up. So those are the things that we see.
Okay, now let's get to Darren, who gets into implementing these and really gets to see all the fun stuff that happens in these projects, right? Darren, what's your thoughts about the challenges that, of trying to set up both an e-commerce and an offline and online experience with your customers?
Yeah, I think that, I've accumulated a lot of experience in this and observations, I should say, too, over the years. Next to last job, prior to starting Irish Titan, I was CIO at Second Swing Golf, and I launched our e-commerce in 2004. I should say there, you can tell, I remember it fondly and think of it fondly. I still say our, right? But we had 75 stores and launched e-commerce, and there was a certain journey to that, going from bricks to clicks. I think prior to that, the job I had immediately prior to that was Wilson's Leather, which was a national retailer, almost $1 billion company, 750 stores. And when we went online in 2001, when I launched their e-commerce, there was some tremendous change management to that, because I think that one of the things that's really changed is there's a massive appetite. If someone's online, they want to explore brick and mortar. If they're brick and mortar, they want to explore online. And way back when, that wasn't actually relevant. Our stores were resistant to e-commerce. So I find it exciting that we're in a new day, a lot of that accelerated by COVID. I think that going from, there's been a lot of great content so far. I think one thing I'll add is going from a real successful brick and mortar store. If you're not online yet, you're probably of a smaller, more boutique nature. And if you're considering going online, the biggest challenge we consistently see is if someone isn't really aware of the ubiquity of online. There are no edges to the internet, right? So you're throwing a pebble in the ocean when you launch a site. And I think you need to keep in mind how competitive that area can be and what you need to do to drive traffic. You're probably not going to be top of Google when you launch your store. And so how are you going to drive acquisition strategies? How are you going to optimize conversion and retention so that the customers you do get, you can retain? So I think that's the business theme that comes to mind, is being aware of the ubiquity of the internet if you're launching a store for the first time. I think specifically or technically or tangibly, one of the things that comes to mind is, it was mentioned by Sean, is the quality and caliber of your integration and your product, order, and customer data. If someone goes in the store and there's a different price than what is online, if that's accidental, that's going to be a problem. If it's intentional, that reflects well on planning. And I'm not suggesting it should be different, but I think that when we have encountered problems with our merchants, it's been when there's been challenges with their catalog management, with their data synchronization, and customers aren't really experiencing a consistent interaction with the customers. We've used the term omnichannel in the conversation so far, which really the concept of that is the customer at the center of all of your operations. And if your integrations are breaking down, you're going to have challenges. That's why I think Shopify, their POS solution, their e-commerce solution, and the integration it naturally provides is a great solution for those exploring that, going from one direction to the other, whatever direction it might be.
Thanks, Darren. I appreciate that. And actually, you almost stole some of my thunder on the integration front, but what I was thinking about too is that you may have a second or third system besides Shopify that you may have to think. Obviously, ShipStation may be one of those systems that you're using as well. You could have a QuickBooks or an ERP system as well. So, how do you start to get those accounts, contacts, shipping information, price information synchronized so you can create a quality customer experience in that orchestration, whether they're walking into your store or they're online? It feels consistent. It feels the same. I think that's the key when people start to think about how do I manage this multi-channel environment? Is how do I drive consistency across those different systems? So thanks, panel. Let's jump to question number 2. So how do you think can companies leverage data to be more proactive post-purchase, right? So once the purchase happens, how do you better manage the communications, the marketing, the cross-sell offerings to create your brand advocates? You know, how do you manage that? I'm thinking this might be a good one where Ken leads because he's the expert in order fulfillment. Ken, do you have thoughts around how can companies proactively kind of drive that better experience post-purchase across these different channels?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this is one of those questions that I could probably talk for hours on for the sake of everyone's time, not going to. But it's really important. I mean, if you think about it from a customer experience, right? And we've all done this. You place an order, now what, right? You're just figuratively and literally waiting for an order. The problem with that is there is a whole slew of steps and opportunity that you're missing that you could capitalize on if you're just sitting there waiting. And so how do you do that? And it comes down to something that Darren said just a minute ago when he was talking about, you know, when you're on these different selling channels and your ratings and how you get up there, a lot of that actually is post-purchase. One of the things that most people forget, and it's nonstop, is they feel that someone places an order, they send a tracking link from a, you know, FedEx, UPS, or a carrier, that it's out of their hands, they're good to go. The data shows that is not true. The reality is you are the face of that order to your merchant. So if they have a bad delivery experience, FedEx does not get a bad review on whatever selling channel you do. And so you really need to own that, because even if you don't want to, you already do. And so then it comes down to the idea of how do you own that? And it's actually very easy. And instead of passing them off to someone else, brand those tracking emails. You know, send that communication that is, you know, that looks like it's coming from you and not from a third party. There's upsell opportunities in there. Really own that customer experience, because again, whether you like it or not, you are the one that's going to have to own whether that is a great experience or a poor experience for a customer. And if you're braining it and going through those, you know, through that process with them, that you're there by your side and you're just communicating the whole time, sending these updates, they're going to have a great experience. You know, it really makes kind of that every order is almost like a Christmas present coming to you, right? You're excited to get it. You can see it coming. The data is accurate. It's the easiest path, right? And it's something that can be done from technology very simply.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. That was a little bit more than I thought you were going to say. So that was actually once again, I'm impressed by this panel. So Darren, I suspect you have some thoughts around this too, as well as, you know, what do you see post sales, and what do you think the top customers do to really drive that experience post sales with their clients?
Yeah, I think that Ken was on the nose there about the importance that prioritizing your post-purchase experience should enjoy in your planning. I think that you're not going to have a return customer if they don't check out in the first place. Like your on-site experience, your sites, you're going to have trouble launching. You're going to have trouble with orders if your on-site experience isn't at least at a bare minimum. And you want to exceed that. But I think a lot of merchants either stop at prioritizing at the checkout or don't prioritize as highly as they should that post-purchase experience, either in how they mine the data, which I'll talk about a little bit, or about how they ensure that it's a positive experience that reinforces your brand. Like Ken mentioned, brand your post-purchase emails. It is so simple, and it goes so far in reinforcing who you are. I think some other things, though, are post-purchase. You can do things like prompt for user-generated content. You can send an email, or if people are signed up for SMS, you can send a text to encourage them to share pictures or create a review, or even share a video. And so, you know, that's a way to reinforce brand and engage your customers, make them feel included, and increase the likelihood that they're going to come back. I think that appreciation emails that aren't even transactional in nature. We all want to be mindful of bombing people's inboxes, but I also think if you have a strong brand with a well-defined voice, and you send emails thanking them, appreciating them for their purchase, that goes a long way in reinforcing that. You want those to be authentic, et cetera. I think that if we talk about how to mine some of the data for post-purchase activities, that's where you really can use that purchase data and a lot of the data available to us in the e-commerce space for personalization. We talk about that a lot. We've all been in the space for a long time and have heard about personalization forever. It's finally actually a possibility because that personalization can inform what those emails might look like, excuse me, that are upsell, cross-sell promotional emails. It might be used to then tailor the product category page when they come back to the site the next time, and it knows what they tend to like. And so I think personalization is a big opportunity for better leveraging data in general, but especially post-purchase.
Got it. How about you, Sean? Any thoughts around the second question? How does Shopify think about post-sales experiences and how to drive that process to maybe drive to advocacy versus just ordering?
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry to cut you off, but just to build on what Darren was saying, that like for me, my thought is, how do I drive customers back to the checkout? So how can I drive incremental sales volume as part of the post-sales process, that follow-up process? And so one is, and I'm sure we've experienced this, is depending on what SKU the customer purchased, or maybe based on personalization in the customer's purchase history, you get a follow-up email with products that align with that SKU, or maybe align with their purchase history for like a fast follow-up purchase decision that drives them back to the online checkout, or maybe drives them in store. From an omni-channel perspective, you can incentivize either or. If you're going to have a coupon that works across both channels, or maybe one channel that you do a fast follow and you can get an incremental sale that way. Or from like, again, building on what Darren was saying with the take a picture with the product, like that social aspect of showing how you're engaging with that product or maybe service in the real world environment, and incentivizing people to post that on their own social channels, I guess. And that person becomes a node to everyone that might be in their social network. And then if I'm looking at it from a business perspective, maybe I want to incentivize that behavior. So you get percentage or dollar coupon if you do that post action, because what does it cost for you to drive direct acquisition of new customers to your digital storefront or your physical storefront? It's getting very, very expensive relative to where it was like 5 years ago. And so to have, that person act as a node to get free advertising and maybe acquisition of new customers to come check out your products or services, it's well worth, incentivizing that as part of the post purchase experience. So now you're getting like multifaceted kind of strategy coming from us here, where you're managing expectations on fulfillment. You're trying to drive satisfaction on the purchase decision, like post sale, as well as drive customer acquisition as part of that whole kind of envelope of things, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to you all. I think about, trying to simplify a very complex thing. And it's like, in the end, right, offline, if there's somebody at that store you tend to go to and really like, and they know you, and, this is back 100 years ago, they made you feel special because they knew you from all your history, right? And what you had done and what you had bought. And so the key is, how do you do that in a multi-channel world and a multi-channel experience? I think you got to leverage your data and that history to make sure everybody that's touching that customer, whether it's digital or in store, is treating you like the relationship you have and not clueless to the relationship you've had around, and is automating those experiences. So you're almost anticipating what you probably would like to do next, as opposed to just shipping you orders and not thinking about what makes sense for you given our relationship and our history, right? So I think it's interesting because it's a little bit of back to the future of how do you operate like that little store that knows everybody when you're dealing with, multiple channels across, both your on and offline.
And if I can chime in real quick, because a thought came to mind based on what you just mentioned. I think that post-purchase is really valuable because it's overlooked, as we already talked about. But Chris made a really good point about, or Sean, excuse me, about why post-purchase is, I think, emerging as more important for another reason. That is, acquisition costs are going up. It's more, acquisition costs are higher than they were 18 months ago. And so what we've seen in a lot of our conversations with our merchants is, because of those costs, they're starting to prioritize at a higher level retention strategies, which is how you can leverage post-purchase to drive up that retention, personalization, et cetera. Like you just mentioned, like showing them what we know they like, and if you think about Spotify, which isn't really e-commerce as we're talking about it, that when your release radar gets updated every Friday, it's amazing how often I find new songs on there that I'm going to like based on what I listen to, right? And they're obviously very advanced with their personalization and their analysis. But I think that those activities really create retention, which is becoming more important because of the skyrocketing cost of acquisition.
That's a great point. Why don't we move to question 3? So we all know customer experience has significant impact, right, on the success of a business. How do you help clients prioritize which technologies they use and which makes sense in what order to try to measure and optimize their different buyer journeys, offline and online? I'm going to let Darren lead this one, because I think Darren deals a lot with probably recommending different technologies to his clients. Thoughts around that, Darren?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. First is, so I'm not sure if anyone on the call is familiar with Simon Sinek. He is a thought leader. A lot of people are big fans of his. His first book was a book called Start With Why, which is a concept of why, how, what. The why is WHY. I'll spare you the rest of the concept. It's easy to absorb online. Our why is business first, online second. And so that means it's not about bits and bytes or pixels or keywords. It's about how we put together our skills to help our merchants grow their businesses after we understand their strategies. And so you've mentioned consultative and consulting a few times. That's our approach. So when we're working with our merchants on how to prioritize what technologies to use or what their journeys might look like, that's really where we start, as a business first, online second mentality. Because I think a lot of people in our broad e-commerce space, especially if we lump together tech partners and agencies, start with the technology right away. What are you doing in reviews? What are you doing in email, et cetera, which are fair questions. But sometimes I think that we jump over the steps with a merchant to better understand what their strategies are, right? Like, what business are you in? What's changing in your market? What's changing in your targeted demographic? During COVID, a lot of supply chain problems, right? And so how is that impacting certain things? Because if you're having trouble getting certain product, that could impact what sort of marketing strategies we might recommend. So we really dig in on that business first, online second angle. So I think that for any merchants on the call, I would encourage you to look for partners who actually want to understand your business, so they can do more than just recommend the automatic things they have in their back pockets because it's the latest 3-letter acronym. I think that after we start to get a sense of that, if I try to get more tangible and less conceptual, I think that we really boil things down into acquisition, conversion, and retention. So what are our merchants doing to try to acquire customers? What are they trying to do to convert customers? And what are they trying to do to retain customers, which we've talked about, right? But we look at things within those areas and then look at metrics like blended ROAS, returning customer orders versus new customer orders, all of those metrics that are readily available in our space. That's one of the great things about e-commerce is, and digital in general, is there are a lot of metrics. We're not inferring how many people are seeing a billboard as they drive by it on the interstate, right? Like, we know how many people are coming. So if we boil down our conversations into acquisition, conversion, retention, that helps us frame those things, which are not always marketing related. Sometimes especially conversion, can really be on site, right? Like, what does your checkout process look like? What does your product category page look like? How are people getting from the home page to the checkout? What's that buying journey? And so the conversion piece of that 3-step funnel, as I like to think about it. I know that some people argue there are 5, like awareness and all that kind of stuff, which I get. But acquisition, conversion, and retention allow us to really structure those conversations and figure out where the priority is and where we start. That's the model that works well for us, and merchants seem to enjoy some tangible structure around that.
Good. Okay. Sean, I think a lot of people think of Shopify as the key platform when they're building out both the offline and online experience. How do you guys recommend what technologies and what order that customers should go about building out their merchant journey, right? As far as that process of building out driving experiences with their customers.
Yeah, I guess I'll talk to what I know on this aspect, and that is that if you have a customer journey and that customer maybe will see something online or in social media, and then they'll investigate. So they'll do some discovery. They'll try and learn about the product. Maybe they look at the manufacturer. Maybe they look at the storefront, or maybe it's the brand, and they're learning about the brand. And they go from online, and maybe they go to a physical location. They interact with the product. They go home. They get an email because they signed up to a loyalty program or something like that with the brand. It reminds them of their prior online visits. And then a week later, it's 10 p.m. and they make a purchase decision on the digital storefront. And so there's this whole journey, this path to purchase that they took that is, I guess, in the acquisition stage, if I'm using Darren's terms, and then eventually they convert. And so the way that I look at it, or Shopify as a platform, participating in that journey, we think that at every step along the journey, that purchase decision should have the ability to be made. So that means if step 1 was social and they have the ability to make that purchase on social, then the technology should support that. And that should be part of like that omni-channel strategy that we're talking about. But if they go in store, then they should be able to make the purchase decision there. I think I spoke about it earlier, but if the product's not physically in store, but it's somewhere else, or it's at the fulfillment node in in St. Louis or on the West Coast or wherever the DCs are set up, you should be able to make that purchase decision, drive that conversion in person, and then have the correct fulfillment logic set so that it's shipped to home. Or if you want to purchase it online and pick it up in store, like this ability should lie there in the tech stack, and you should have the different solutions integrated to support that. But ultimately, the way I'm looking at it is that the purchase decision should be able to be made wherever the customer wants to make it in that journey, in that acquisition journey. If it's at step 1, we shouldn't be funneling them necessarily to a conversion point unless there's an intent to do that as part of the business plan. But that's kind of how I look at it.
Okay. Ken, any thoughts around this particular topic?
Yeah. So in terms of the order or what specific technologies, a lot of that is going to vary kind of on your business. And there's a million factors. I mean, look, there's hundreds of technologies you can use and thousands of vendors that sell them all. And it's hard to parse through it. And there's a lot of great ones. There really is no silver bullet of like, this is the one you need. It doesn't exist. I hate to give you a spoiler alert on that. A lot of it is coming down to what you want to use. The typical path, though, that we see, right? A small business starts up, they have 2 or 3 technologies. It might be a QuickBook, something basic, and then they start to scale and they realize they need this. And then all of a sudden it's 10 or 12 or 15 technologies. Well, there's a fundamental problem, and we see it every day, and that's integration. Because what ends up happening is you have all these different technologies, and if they're not communicating properly to each other, you have a serious problem. Your data is not talking, you're getting wrong information. Best case scenario, you're doing manual work, which is not a good plan, right? I mean, just the human error that's involved in that can dramatically, and I mean, Darren knows this for sure, like it can change your perspective on your business because all of a sudden you think you're making X and you're really not, right? I mean, you really have to know this if you're going to make concrete plans. So what I always try to tell people is say, look, visualize where you're at now, where your business is and what technologies you use. Where do you want to be in the near future, like 1 to 3 years, right? And then if things based on your vision, I'm hoping to scale, right? That's hopefully a goal. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Start looking at those technologies that you think you're going to need to build out to. I know it's hard because it's hard. No one knows the future, but you really do have to spend some time and sit down and think of it, or get with someone. Again, there's plenty of people, even on this panel, that have gone through this journey that can help you and talk to you about what they've seen, what works, and how that path works. Because if you don't, I mean, look, there's an old adage in sports that it's better to trade a player a year early than a year too late. And it's the same with technology. You are way better being a year early than a year late, because a year late, you've lost money. It's way more complex to change all these different systems around, and then when you're looking at these technologies that do support your actual vision, then it gets complicated, right? Because you really want to take that 12, 10, 15, whatever crazy number that is, and try to get that. Can you get that down to 8? Can you get down to 6, 4, some reasonable number where the integration points are really manageable? Now, again, another spoiler alert, integrations, they do break. I mean, it's technology. It's going to happen. Your iPhone's going to break. Your TV is going to break. It's inevitable. So having less breaking points is much easier to manage, right? And especially if something does go wrong, you'd rather have it one of 4 things or 6 things than one of 15 things. That's hard to solve. The other piece of this, and we run into this a lot, be careful with customizations, right? There's a lot of, we want everything custom because this is how we do it. Everything you do from that point will be way more expensive and more complex. I'm just being honest, because everything now has to be completely custom. It's like if you build doors in your house that aren't the standard size, nothing is going to fit at that point, right? So you have to be mindful of what's truly a want and what's truly a need in this technology, right? What do you really need versus what are nice to haves? And again, that's going to vary from business to business. So again, I think the biggest piece of this is really try to step back and build that future plan, right? Look where you're at today and try to visualize where you're going to go. Because once you do that, the technologies really in your tech stack start to line up. You can really start looking, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to go. This might get me, maybe I'm too small for an ERP, right? But I'm going to need some of those features so I can add this on, and you can start seeing which ones integrate with which, because they usually put it on their website. And that's a key path, because if they're partners and they're working together, you're going to have, obviously a much cleaner path to any kind of support, any kind of, troubleshooting that you're going to have, because again, those issues don't arise when you're slow. They're going to happen when you're at your busiest time, right? And so if you have technology that is used to working together, you can usually get it resolved very quickly. So that's my 2 cents.
Good stuff. So I was thinking, kind of wrapping up that idea, was that, as you're growing as a merchant, you're probably growing in systems, and you're evolving your systems, really, Ken. That's what you're saying, right? That system that may have got you from, a certain size of company now needs to change to get you to the next level. And so we think a lot about APIs and how do those evolve into what can you do with best of breed versus suites, right? So I think of Shopify as a great suite that reduces the number of systems that you may need to do that, right? But you may need specialty modules from certain SaaS vendors or whatever, like a ShipStation, to specialize in those areas, and you've got to coordinate. So you're constantly kind of thinking through, how do I reduce friction? How do I reduce frustrations with my customers by making sure that's seamless? At the same time, how do I grow my business and leverage new innovations, but make sure they're integrated to the innovations I already have, right? And so that's a constant journey that we see customers having to go through, and merchants thinking about as they work through adding new systems and then figuring out how to make sure they still operate seamlessly across the environment. So, my advice to those out there is keep looking for what is your competition doing and what is your friction and frustration points, and then start to think about what is the priority of what you should be integrating and automating first, second, third in those technologies as you're growing your business. So let's go to the last question I put together. And I kind of got a kick out of this because I think Darren said, everybody's got to have 3-letter acronyms. Well, I think our attention span has gotten so short, we just need 2-letter acronyms now, right? And so this 2-letter acronym is, what role, very topical, do you see AI playing in omnichannel and commerce kind of going forward? And how do you think it will affect the customer experience? And I'll kick this one off a little bit because I think we touched on some of this, but I think if you see a lot of the information coming out these days, there's a lot around how AI will help us with personalization and how we can leverage that data to grab more of it to be able to personalize more effectively. Obviously, chatbots are becoming very popular in the ability to help kind of virtually assist customers around those issues. Predictive analytics and sentimental analytics allow us to look at things and then recommend better. And then obviously voice and visual search is becoming very popular with AI. So you don't necessarily have to navigate, you just talk to the screen and it'll navigate for you what you're looking for. And then the other one that we see coming up is fraud detection and security. That's a core area where we think AI is going to start to add value to the merchants as they work through what are some people doing online or offline that doesn't look like it's the proper behavior. So with that, I'll turn it over to the rest of the panel and really let anybody jump in that may have a thought around this as well. Darren, do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that you covered at least some of my immediate reactions. AI is pervasive right now. We can't go anywhere in the industry, whether it's an internal industry event or a merchant-facing event. We can't go anywhere without AI being very top of it. I think that generative AI, the chat GPTs of the world, are what is driving this top of mind kind of frothy nature to it right now. And understandable, because some of that bleeds into chat support and bots and some of the communication facing activities. I think that what sometimes is overlooked is AI has already been shaping omnichannel, because AI, Shopify and ShipStation, Octane, have been using AI for years now, because AI kind of is fuzzy math, to oversimplify it, try to use sort of everyday terms. That it's how computing is becoming more advanced. We're able to analyze more data more quickly, make more pointed recommendations, and that's been happening for a while. So yes, personalization absolutely is going to become. I mentioned that it's finally actually a reality, and that's because of AI's growing power. I think that the other aspect of AI, though, this generative AI, that is going to impact content writing and marketing, because it is much easier now to create content and then curate it than it was previously. I was on a panel last week in New York City, and the moderator for the panel had ChatGPT build our bios that he read.
Oh, wow.
They were pretty damn close, and he said he didn't even curate them or edit them at all. And they were pretty damn close. So think about how you can enhance and lift your marketing, whether it's a little more targeted because of AI computation, or the messaging by having AI create it and then having one of your talented copywriters and editors and brand ambassadors really get it on point. So I think that's one of the things that comes to mind.
Great. Thanks, Darren. So we're a little behind time. Sean, Ken, anything you want to add around AI before we turn it over to the Q&A for the audience?
Yeah, I'll just add a quick note here. To Darren's point, we've been using it for a while to predict different SKUs and order sources, delivery points, and things like that. And that's arguably slimmed down to the stuff that he just described, right? if you've ever been inside of a modern warehouse, it is crazy the AI technologies that are being used.
Mhm.
That, I mean, in terms of accuracy and reducing labor costs and just efficiency, it's insane. I mean, it looks like you're watching a movie from the 80s or something. It's nuts. You know, another aspect of this is also looking at how do you do it from your brick and mortar store? And there really are smaller versions of AI type like pack stations and different technologies that you can put that aren't $1 million giant warehouse systems, but they're ones that you can use to help you be more efficient. So you don't need 10 people to pack. You can do it with 2, right? Or whatever it is problem you're trying to solve. So they do make scaled down versions that do work for SMBs as well.
John, you get the final word. Any thoughts?
Sure. I'll go back into content generation. So today you can, if you're doing a marketing strategy, maybe you're tailoring your marketing based on customer profiles or cohorts that you build. And now what we're looking at is tailored messaging generated essentially instantaneously on the per person level based on their shopping behavior with your brand, and maybe even their path to purchase and how they interact with your brand across different touch points that you can track. So messaging that's truly personalized, and then you decide to develop and initiate a campaign, and it's completely personalized messaging that has whatever intent you're trying to do there, whatever outcomes you're trying to drive. And that is, I just got goosebumps thinking about it because my mind races onto what does that actually mean when it goes out to 10,000 or 10 million customers. Like it's in the future, I guess. It's coming fast. So yeah, if it's not already happening.
I'm impressed, Sean, you gave yourself goosebumps. Not everybody can do that. Okay, so let's turn it over to David. And David, do we have any QA going on? Might be worth the panel. I think we got about 10 minutes left or so.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm going to start here. How do we balance using AI versus keeping the personalized experience for customers? Is the technology really there and ready for AI to be trustworthy and customer facing?
Let's ask Goosebumps first. What does he think about?
In my interactions with like ChatGPT to date, I would say yes. The ability to do it at say in the scale of millions of personalized messages, I'm unsure of if like the computation power is there that's cost effective, because it does cost money. But it's definitely there now. You can put the guardrails in to make sure that it's not messaging things that would be counter to say the brand experience or what outcomes you're trying to drive.
Cool.
Darren, any other thoughts you may have on this?
Yeah, I think that, well, AI, any of us are already using AI every day. If you go to Google and just Google some topic, Google's using AI to come up with those results. It's just not the generative AI. And so I think that where a lot of people's concerns and questions come from is where there's an intersection of AI generating content and where there is a handshake between that generated content and what actually does become customer facing. And depending on the tool you're using, I think you'll need to dig into that, right? Like, I think that there are some tools you might use that are going to present results that are AI generated without any checkpoint for approval, editing, etc. No curation. There are other tools that do allow for and or require curation before something's posting. So I think that that's the main thing to really dig into, because it is here and it can be used. You just want to get a sense of what boundaries, what guardrails are around it.
Yeah, what I was thinking about with generative AI versus other AIs, right, is that we've kind of been in the background using these and tuning these. But now if you let something automate on your own, you better trust that's communicating correctly. And so what I think about is, I think it's experiment and tune time with a lot of us around generative AI, because we're gonna want to make sure that recommendation is high quality. But if it looks like it's doing, to your point, 80, 90%, pretty good recommendations. And we all know humans aren't the best recommenders sometimes, right?
Right.
That may be good enough for your environment to scale up and really help you potentially reduce costs in having to hire 3 more people to do something that maybe the AI can help with. Ken, did you have any thoughts before we go to the next question?
Yeah, I mean, just AI is a very general term, right? It's like business. What does that mean? It could be anything, right? So again, it's going to vary on the types. Obviously, we've been using it, but again, where's it pulling data from? What's it going to use? I mean, if it's just pulling from your Wikipedia page and that's where it gets its information, it's probably not the most accurate, right? But again, when you're looking at a lot of these different technologies, a lot of them are very tried and tested, and they do exactly what they're supposed to do. So you just got to research it and figure out which ones fit your needs.
Cool. All right, let's do two.
David.
Let's do 2 more. Here we go. Can we use low or no shipping costs as a way to get customers to buy more? Is this something we should try to market front and center? And will this entice customers to buy more, or do they not care? They care more about the product and they're willing to pay for the shipping.
I'm guessing Ken may have an opinion on this.
I might, I kind of do this. Again, it depends on your business, right? If you're selling a product, a widget, and there's 900 people that sell the same widget, then you are looking for competitive advantages, whether that's shipping or pricing and things like that. If it's something that's a little bit more unique and more proprietary, then it's more about the item. And again, that's something Darren could definitely go into much greater detail because that's more of what he does. But what I would tell you from a shipping perspective, there's been countless studies of these. It's worth a Google. The average person wants a delivery within 3 days. That's it. So if you can get it there in 3 days, they know delivery's not free. If it's reasonable, they're actually fine with it, right? And here's the funny thing: only like 60% of people actually meet that expectation, which is sad. So realistically, if you just get it there in 3 days, which you should be able to do from the point they place the order, you can make a very happy customer. You don't really have to give in free shipping, and we all know nothing's free, guys. You're marking that item up. It's not free, right? So it doesn't really, for most cases, doesn't really matter.
Darren, any other thoughts?
I'll be super succinct on this, and I'll say what Ken said.
Oh, wow. That was very good.
He was spot on. It is
All right.
it's the delivery, not the price.
Got it. David, next
Yeah,
question.
let's do one more. We want to open up pop-ups around the country quickly, in collaboration with our current brick and mortar store. What are some of the challenges in doing that in terms of keeping brand consistency and the customer experience consistent?
I suspect Sean might be the best person to start this one.
Yeah, so brand consistency and customer experience consistent. If you're using like an omni-channel commerce tool, say like Shopify, then out of the box, you have the ability to make sure that the purchase environment is consistent. So how people buy and how people are able to leverage technology to exchange or look up inventory and fulfill from other locations if you decide to do that. A lot of it rolls down to your leaseholds, like how you actually curate your pop-up environment. So what does that footprint actually look like? Where is it? How is it staffed? Are you using your SOPs from your actual main retail 24/7 bricks and mortar location? And are you putting that down into the pop-up practices, or are you just kind of winging it in the pop-up environment? Because people do that. They don't actually think ahead of time, okay, well, what is a customer experience going to look like? So, visualize it, do a temp one in a location or out back of your bricks and mortar store, and actually practice that and see what it looks like to actually set it up and create that purchase environment. Make sure you have the technology in place to support it so that the buying experience for the customer experience is the same as if they walked into your permanent bricks and mortar location. And the last one is staffing, one thing I will say is that coming out of the pandemic, there are, when looking for pop-up locations, a lot of REITs and big real estate, business real estate firms are doing what they call creative leasing. And so they will do temporary leasing on good locations, and set like maybe percentage of sales terms versus you having to actually commit to a long-term per square foot price lease for prime retail locations. So we're talking like good malls in throughout the country. So where you decide to do your pop-up, you might actually get pretty good real estate and access to it through a creative leasing solution. It's not something Shopify does, but something I am aware of happening in the bricks and mortar space.
No, that's a great point, because I think we all know commercial real estate may be getting a little worse here soon. And so people may be getting much more creative on their ability to drive that lease cost down to help people pop up faster. David, last question. I think we got 5 minutes for the hour.
Yeah. All right, this one's interesting. Our current ERP does not give us the tools we need. We're looking to open up numerous pop-up shops around the country sooner than later. Do you recommend switching over our ERP now or later?
So Ken, you want to give your baseball analogy again, or sport analogy again? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, all ERPs, they're fantastic technologies, right? But they all have different limitations. They all started somewhere and do certain things well. And that's the reality of it. So, if that's really your path and they can't handle it, absolutely. Start having interviews. I mean, conversations are free. So trust me, they all want to talk to you. And see which one fits, the path that you're trying to take. Again, it's that visualizing your next step, visualizing the technology you're going to need. You want to do it sooner than later.
Darren, do you have any thoughts around that? What your thought? Because, a lot of people, ERP is scary, right? Big implementations, change or whatever. What do you think is realistic for people to switch ERPs and be able to handle that in a reasonable time frame? What's been your experience?
Yeah, I think that I had some thoughts around this earlier when implementations came up, and for the sake of brevity, I didn't try to inject them. But I think that implementations take longer than people expect if they haven't been through those rodeos. And ERPs in particular are the most painful in terms of not being as quick as people might hope for them to be if they haven't been through those rodeos. And even if you have been through rodeos, ERPs are notorious for taking a long time, right? And so that can really vary based on the size of the enterprise. A massive enterprise, so one of our enterprise clients has hundreds of stores, a massive online business. They're going through an ERP process. They're probably going to make their selection this week. I'll leave all names out of it, but their implementation, that's probably a 2 to 3 year implementation, quite honestly. I think that an online only merchant or a smaller footprint can be, I would hesitate to say anything less than 6 months on an ERP, quite honestly. And even that could be brief because of how many parts of a business an ERP touches. It can be a lighter lift if it's really financial focused, a QuickBooks implementation, for example. That's a lighter lift, right? But if it starts to incorporate OMS and integrate with e-commerce, and those touch points start to emerge like most modern ERPs or at least offer, then you're looking at a longer time frame, which means that you probably should, like if you're thinking, God, we need an ERP, we want to launch a number of pop-ups, that probably means you should be starting on your ERP journey now.
Yeah, the one thing I was thinking about to wrap up here is that we focus a lot on ERP integration, right? One of the reasons we do is that we think it's kind of at the heart of a lot of companies, and that's where the most integration points are. And so what we find is that we see people using this to migrate data from legacies, synchronize data between two other ERPs, but as they're moving, and doing a lot of things where they may run simultaneously on the new one to test while they're running production on the old one, and then cutting over potentially over a year or two. So there's a way that it doesn't have to be, one night you go and you cross your fingers, right? But I do think that there's an opportunity for people to think about How do I take that 1 year, 2 year journey to scale up to the next level and make sure my integrations don't break in that process, right? That's a key issue that I think drives fear in people moving from ERP to ERP. With
And I-
that, David, I'm going to turn it back to you to wrap up.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Ron. Thank you so much. Thanks, Darren, Ken, and Sean for joining us again. And thank you all for attending today. We will send out a link with the recording. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop us a line. And with that, have a good evening, good afternoon, and an even better morning. Talk to y'all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.